that says we're streaming. You see that down there, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's try this again. All right, so we need to keep an eye on that to make sure we're still live and on the air.
Right.
We're in an alternate location today, trying a mobile studio in a new spot, and this is now the third time we're trying to do this because it was not going out over the air. So we're going to pretend like we didn't just talk about stuff for almost a half hour now, and we're going to take it from the top with feeling. Welcome everybody to Culture Goes Pop, episode 36. What are we going to talk about this episode, Scott T. Wilson?
This episode, we're going to talk about, are video games going to be the next frontier that Hollywood looks to mine IP from? And will video games supplant superheroes as water cooler conversation or the center of the pop culture universe, especially in terms of Hollywood adapting films from them? And are these films going to become more prestigious and get more attention? And will they, again, supplant superheroes at the box office and in water cooler conversation, basically, for lack of a better phrase?
Right, because most people will be talking about, especially leading up to the Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. I'm sure there were a lot of people who weren't even necessarily super duper comic book fans, but just jumped on the superhero bandwagon because the movies were just good movies. They were good entertainment. Yes, they're based on properties by Marvel, which are ripped from the pages of comic books, which is typically something that was either adored by either kids or just nerdy adults, or kids that grew up into nerdy adults. But not every normal person is a fan of superheroes. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe made superheroes very viable to family-friendly quality entertainment. So even if the parents weren't superhero fans, they took their kids. And the movies just became larger than life. So yeah, we've had a good decade to a decade and a half run where Marvel Studios has been dominating the box office for the most part. DC's catching up. But last week we started to talk about, will the superhero bubble burst? And is there going to be a decline in audience participation and ticket sales and things like that? So the possibility of the superhero bubble bursting is already out there, and that was the topic of last week's episode. This week we're going to talk about, will movies based on video games or even video games themselves be the next frontier, like you say, that the corporations will start to turn into the next cash cow that we can now push out to the consumers and hopefully profit from. And take it away.
To quickly set the stage for the conversation, I'm not saying that Hollywood hasn't already provided us with a number of films based on video games. They have. But at some point in the development of any genre or subgenre or any fad or trend or long-running trend, there's usually a tipping point where it becomes mainstream, where it becomes something that not just the core fan base indulges. For instance, superhero movies had a number of moments like that leading up to the release of Iron Man in 2008 and the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The 1978 Superman, which was what kicked off the entire craze, or rather kind of started this whole, if you want to call it a genre, because some people argue that it's not actually a genre, but that was the first big budget Hollywood production based on a popular superhero that was created in comic books.
Right.
But that was an across-the-board smash that didn't just appeal to the core fan base. It appealed to the four quadrants, as they call them, male, female, young, and old. And it was appreciated in more than one sector. Video game movies still have not had that moment or that movie or that show, but a big sign of that things may be changing is the way that The Last of Us was received. especially when the first episode or two aired. That seemed to signal a sea change because that was rapturously accepted. Here you had something, you didn't have to be a fan of the game, and you didn't have to simply evaluate it in terms of how well it represented the game. This is something that even if you came in completely cold and never played the game before, you could actually enjoy this. And critics and the public alike seem to respond very positively to it. And to me, it felt like sort of a watershed moment that might be remembered in years to come as more TV shows and movies come out based on video games and are received as well or better.
Right, and I think ultimately what's going to determine the success of a movie or a streaming series, some type of entertainment production, is how well it's treated by the actors who are doing the roles, by the directors, everything else. If you treat something with respect and you do it well, regardless of the subject matter, something that's produced with heart and soul should be well received, assuming the subject matter is of interest to a certain a group of people. So and it's another example because there are some similarities to The Last of Us to like The Walking Dead. So The Walking Dead is dealing with a zombie apocalypse. The Last of Us is dealing with a different type of apocalypse. They're not your normal zombies, but they are kind of undead. They're infected. Their brain has been taken over by these molds and spores and fungi. So it's a similar concept to a zombie, but just a different mechanism to the zombieism. But it's a similar zombie apocalypse style. Now, The Walking Dead, which was a hugely successful live-action show on AMC, was based on a graphic novel or comic book. But because it was done so well, it garnered a huge fan base because it was quality entertainment. So regardless of what the source material was, if you produce it well, you've got great actors who are really bringing these characters to life, and it's shot well, and it's produced well, and it's done, like I say, with heart and soul, I think it will resonate and it will find an audience. There are probably many more Walking Dead fans who are a fan of the TV series who never saw the comic book. And if it's done well enough, you shouldn't have to. Right, like The Last of Us on HBO is based on a game on the Sony PlayStation, which I don't own, so I've never seen the game, but I enjoyed watching the show. Whether or not I knew what the game was, the show held its own. It had its own legs, it could hold its own water, and it was a compelling story that was well produced and well performed. So it was quality. It was a quality production. It was quality entertainment, and ultimately anything that is done with quality and done with love. Just like, how grandma bakes her cookies. She bakes them with love. You can buy, a cookie, corporate cookie from Keebler out of a bag. It's not the same thing as what grandma makes, right? So grandma cookie is made with love. If something's made with love, it should be successful.
Right. I also realized that the question we're asking in itself may be sort of, I don't know if redundant is the right word, but because video games over the past 20 or so years have taken on a lot of the same characteristics as movies, with all of the cutscenes and animatics and cinematics and things like that. Video games for a long time now have kind of been seen as playable movies. So, and people have asked the question, will video games sort of supplant cinema itself as being sort of a major pastime or a major form of entertainment? Because some people have already made the argument over the last decade that television has already done that movies themselves are no longer the center of water cooler conversation, because that's how it used to be for a long time. Right. Movies were the center of everything. And
some great series that kind of triggered that, and I missed them at the time, but I remember everybody talking about Lost and everybody talking about Heroes. These were some huge shows that were on TV that everybody was talking about. And I never saw them until they were on Netflix, 10 years later.
But it was also, I think, really what kickstarted a lot of that was The Sopranos, a lot of the pay cable
quality
shows.
TV. Yeah.
But now we're in a place where, in terms of multimedia, again, everything doesn't seem to revolve around cinema as much as it once did. And with video games, I'm just wondering if we're going to see that big bang moment finally happen, because now we have the Super Mario movie coming up, which is something that has people have been waiting for a long time. And
Mario is immensely popular,
Right.
multi-generationally popular. It will bring a lot of families. So the kids are all going to want to see it. Young kids are going to want to see it, and kids who grew up on any generation of Nintendo, because there's been almost a dozen generations of Nintendos now, going back to the original NES, to the Super Nintendo, to the Game Boy, to the GameCube, to the Nintendo 64, to the Wii, to the Switch. There's been so many generations of Nintendos and so many iterations of Mario that have spanned 30 years. There's a huge built-in audience for that. So the kids will want to see it. The parents will have to take the kids. The people who were kids in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s that loved it then are going to want to see it too. So it's almost a built-in following. It's almost like unless they just do a movie really, really bad, it's going to do well in the box office just because the property is so beloved. And in a way, that's almost scary. If I had to be the one responsible for making a movie based on Mario that has been loved by so many generations, I'd be afraid to screw the pooch. Just like a superhero movie, there's been so many versions of Spider-Man. How do we tell a Spider-Man story? And I love what Sam Raimi did. He pretty much told the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko origin story just in the 20th century, 21st century. But that was a good way to kick that off. But Mario's been around so long. What version of Mario are we going to see? I don't think there are going to be angry fans, but not everybody's going to see what they wanted to see, I'm sure. But it'll sell a ton of tickets.
That's the thing that's another thing that I think fans still have yet to realize. It doesn't really matter what the fans think beyond a certain degree, because these things are made to appeal to a large cross-section of people. Now, the video game movies we've gotten, I would argue, up until this point, for the vast majority of them, and I don't even know if there's any really exceptions, the vast majority of them, even the best ones, have mainly appealed to people who are gamers.
To the built-in fan base.
And a lot of these gamers, I've noticed, are not necessarily judging the films themselves on their own merits as films. They're judging these things based on how well it represents the source material. In reality, a successful Resident Evil movie isn't just looked at in terms of the games themselves and how well they represent those games. It would be looked at as can you show this to somebody who's never played a Resident Evil game before, or even in some cases never seen a zombie movie before, and can they get in some level of enjoyment or engagement out of it? And that's what I'm just going to put it all on the table. I think that's what every video game movie up until this point, even some of the better ones like Sonic the Hedgehog. Well, Sonic the Hedgehog is kind of tipping it there into going beyond just the base. But that's what will really be needed, because with superhero films, and like I was saying when we tried to record before, if you look at the development of the modern superhero movie, I would say that it's sort of in three phases. You could probably break it down into more. You had the Superman in 1978.
Michael Keaton Batman, maybe 1989.
Michael Keaton Batman, but I'm not sure that Batman is the beginning. Batman is a very important watershed moment, but I'm not sure it's the beginning of the end. In a sense, the Michael Keaton Batman was kind of a continuation of what Superman had started. It came out it was 11 years, almost exactly a decade afterward, and then it sort of revived it. Batman sort of revived what Superman had started. And then, but I would say probably from 1978 Superman to 1997 with Batman and Robin, which was seen as closing the door on a superhero.
Yeah, Joel Schumacher basically killed the franchise.
and then Blade revived a certain measure of interest. And I think Blade is kind of this in-between stopgap, very important film again. But then you get phase 2, which starts, I think, with X-Men and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. And those things kind of, again, they revive it. They put some more fuel on the fire. And then that brings us to, I think, 2008 with Iron Man. That begins the third phase, where now you begin to see when you see it become a full-fledged phenomenon, when you see superhero movies become a full-fledged phenomenon where we see their full economic power. We see just how popular they can be. We see even critics showing them some measure of respect, with the apex of which you get with Black Panther being nominated for Best Picture a few years ago, and just this year, Wakanda Forever with Angela Bassett being nominated for Best Actress.
Good for her.
So sometimes I wonder if superhero movies are in one of those earlier stages of development, and perhaps The Last of Us signals that we might finally be getting that real watershed tipping moment, that tipping point that brings this into, now it's not just about the gamers. And gamers, I'm going to tell you right now, one of the things you're going to be annoyed about, the way you'll know that these properties that you love have truly become a thing, is when the majority of people who claim to be fans of them have never even played the game.
Right.
That's how you know that, and that's going to piss off every gamer in the world. But that's how it's going to be.
Right, yeah, and it's almost like when you had your favorite band, like your indie local band, and that they were your special secret. You knew about them, you saw them play at the clubs, so you were their biggest fan, and nobody else knew about them, and it was your own best secret, and you wanted them to stay that indie struggling band forever. But as what they wanted wasn't that. They're like, this is where we're starting, but we want to grow. We want to get more successful. We want to be on a record label. We want to be on the charts. And then you're like, well, they sold out, right? Well, no, they just evolved. And, like I think one of the phrases you used a lot when we were talking about hip hop was you rage against the machine until you become part of it,
Yeah.
And so if you love video games and that's your cherished thing, and then video game movies become successful, then it's almost like, wait, that was my special thing, and now it's not special. Now it's corporate. Now it's just become this big sellout thing. But another great example is the live-action series of The Walking Dead. There are so many fans of The Walking Dead TV show that never either knew or would ever look at the graphic novel or the comic series that it was based on. And again, it was based on that source material, but it went off in a lot of different directions. Different characters had different roles. The most popular character, Norman Reedus' character, wasn't even in the graphic novel, and he got so beloved by the fans that there's no way they could kill him. So you can change things, and they can be just as loved by the fans. And again, this is now the third time we're trying to do this tonight, so I don't remember what I said before versus what I said since we've been live now for 10 minutes. But if you do it well, and it has its own legs, and it can hold water, and it's done with heart, and it's done with love, the movie should be a good movie, regardless of what it's based on, regardless of what it was derived from or inspired from. And I think The Last of Us on HBO is a great example of that, because I never played the game, but I enjoy the show based on its own merits. It is quality entertainment. I know it's based on a game, but that's not affecting my enjoyment to watch it. Not only that, but it's inspired me to want to now buy and play the game. So it's going to turn me into the fan of the game.
And and I hope that gamers realize that's what you're really supposed to shoot for. It's not about really fidelity to the source material, because people need to realize movies and TV shows are a different medium than video games or comic books. They're all different. Movies and TV shows are different mediums, so to speak, and both of those are different mediums from superhero comics, and all three of those are different mediums from video games, and all four of those are different from each other. Like that's how that works. One thing in this discussion also that I think needs to be touched upon is that there are some video games that probably never need to be made into movies because, and I'll bring up an example, my favorite video game franchise of all time, Grand Theft Auto.
Right.
They were talking about making that into a movie in the early 2000s, but because if people remember, it became a craze with Grand Theft Auto 3, which I think came out in, was that 2000? I can't remember exactly when that came out, but and then you had Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and then you had San Andreas. Then and this is coming into 2004, and in those few years, like from 2000 to 2004 or 5. Grand Theft Auto became I think that was probably the biggest thing in video games, and I think that the latest iteration is like the biggest selling piece of media ever. I'm not sure.
GTA 5 is, people are still playing it online. People are still buying it. If you play it on the PC, there's tons of mods for it that keep it alive and extend the life. Yeah, GTA 5 is going on 10 years now. It's selling just as much, has just as much online gameplay as it did when it was the new kid on the block.
And at some point between, I think around 2005 maybe, I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was sometime like in the late aughts, the late 2000s, when they said they were going to, there's plans for a Grand Theft Auto movie. Now, Ray Liotta had done the voice of, I think it was Tommy Vercetti for Vice City.
Okay.
The great Ray Liotta.
Now the late great, unfortunately.
The late great, yeah. That's still messing with me.
Rest in peace, Ray.
Yeah, and but they were talking about doing a movie. I think Ray Liotta was supposed to be involved. And I remember thinking, even at the time, that's kind of redundant because Grand Theft Auto itself is informed by a bunch of gangster movies and stuff.
Right. It's inspired by, it's a video game inspired by Goodfellas and all these other things like that. Right?
So we've already had.
Right. That would become art imitating the art that was imitating the art.
Yeah, and, and of course, a lot of our favorite entertainment is built on that, like Star Wars. But still, I don't need to ever see a Grand Theft Auto movie or TV show because I've already, if you play
the game,
if you've seen Scarface, you've seen Vice City. If you've seen Menace to Society and Boys in the Hood, you've seen San Andreas. I mean, so like we really don't need that.
Although Grand Theft Auto 4, The Tale of Nico and Roman in New York City, was a cool story. I don't know that we've seen that exact story.
Well, we've seen the Russian mob in many things, not necessarily as famous as, say, some of the names we've mentioned already, but we've seen. I mean, all those things were kind of cliches in movies and television shows by the time Grand Theft Auto. That's what made Grand Theft Auto fun, was you got to be interactive.
Right. We have video games in general. Whereas a movie is a completely passive experience, a video game is an interactive experience where you're doing a lot of the driving of the story and the narrative, and then every now and then you get a cinematic cut scene that becomes more like the movie parts. Like you have to play for an hour to get to the next scene in the movie. But the nice thing about how the video game narrative is driven is that you can take different choices and the story will play out slightly differently as you play it. And so there's a lot of replay value. And the number of hours per dollar in a video game, I think, is better because if you go to the movies, you're going to spend $15, you're going to get about 2 hours of entertainment, and then you can't enjoy that entertainment again unless you go back and spend another $15. So you're looking at $7 per hour, $7.50 per hour. Average video game is $60 when it's brand new. And you're going to get a minimum of 20 hours of entertainment if you speed ran a video game, and that's now like $3 per hour. So your bang for buck is lower. Bigger video games give you hundreds of hours, not to mention season passes and downloadable content and multiple ways to play and alternate endings and everything else. So like I am now playing Hogwarts Legacy for the second time, and I'm playing a different house. The first time I played, I was in House Hufflepuff, and I played a male character. Now I'm playing in Slytherin house as a female character. And there's different things play out differently in the story.
One thing I just want to say, because I'm looking in the chat, we have Rowdy in the chat. What's up, Rowdy?
Rowdy and Lewis.
We have Louis Reyes.
Hey guys.
Louis Reyes raised a point I want to kind of address, that Futurama, the show Futurama, has a scene in a theater where people voted on the outcome, I guess, of a movie they were watching or something. Now that's the thing
choose your own ending.
That's the thing I'm afraid of,
right?
Because with video game movies, and it's kind of funny because in a sense video games have become more than, I don't even really call these games anymore. It is more kind of a choose your adventure sort of thing.
It's an experience,
and like. That's one of the things, like, I never wanted, they tried that years ago. I remember the guy that wrote the screenplay for Back to the Future, and this was decades ago. They tried that. They put out some movie that was like in the seats that you were sitting in, that people watching could vote on the outcome. And I remember thinking, that's the worst idea I think I've ever heard of in my life.
Well, now that it's digital too, you could pull it off better. Back then they would have had to change reels and maybe had different reels.
But the thing is, that becomes almost like a by committee sort of thing. It's like fans have this idea. Fans really seem to have this idea with like their favorite properties, that if they could sort of vote and decide on what kind of movie gets made, then the movies would come out better. No, if that would have happened,
Right.
that would result in some of the worst.
Yeah,
movies
anything
we've ever
that's
seen.
designed by committee is going to fail. And by the way, speaking of shout-outs, my good friend Uncle Mark Zatorsky is out there. He's a filmmaker, writer, producer, director, good friend of mine. We used to do sketch comedy back in the day and stand-up comedy back in the day. Hey, Mark, how you doing? Say hi to Shawnee for me. Video games to me, and for the past 10 years, I've enjoyed video games more because I'm more into the story and I can spend more hours on that story. And there's a role-playing element to it. And even in this Hogwarts game that I'm playing now, you can answer different ways. Like if I wanted to be really a snotty SOB, I could answer everybody as a real sarcastic SOB. So you can give the good answer, you can give the snotty answer, so you can play different personalities and how you respond to people and the questions in that. When we talk about, and again, I don't remember if we said this earlier, but The Last of Us now streaming on HBO is based on a video game that I didn't see, and I did mention that when I watched the series, and I've seen the whole season now. It stands on its own as quality live action entertainment, regardless of the source material. But the bonus of this, the benefit is, I didn't have to know the game existed to enjoy it. I just enjoyed it. But it also inspired me to now want to get the video game. So I'm waiting for that to come out. Another one, and I'll let you talk, sorry, was The Witcher. Right, so I had The Witcher 3 video game on my computer and on my Xbox for years. I tried playing it a few times, couldn't figure it out, couldn't get into it. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then The Witcher comes out on Netflix with Henry Cavill, who, if you're an uber nerd fan, you love Henry Cavill because he did Superman. He's like the next generation Christopher Reeve. Like Henry Cavill's Superman is the next thing. He is, even though he's British, he's like America and apple pie because he's our generation's Superman. So Henry Cavill did a hell of a job doing this season 1 of The Witcher on Netflix. And I'm like, dude, they made a live action series based on a video game. That's kind of cool. And then it comes to turn out that the video game is actually based on a book. So I watched Netflix series. I got really into it. And then I played the video game. I got really into that. And then I'm like, I want to listen to the book. So I've got like a half a dozen audiobooks now too that I started listening to. So in some ways, you mentioned earlier that a fan of the video games might get upset that now their sacred little ball of light is now gone mainstream, and now a lot of people love it who didn't even know it was a video game, and they could view that as a negative. For me, it just broadened my horizons. I became a fan of the property. I became a fan of The Witcher and Geralt of Rivia. So I love the live action series, I love the video game, and I love the audiobooks. And so I listen to all of them, and I think they all have their own value because they're different mediums. So for me, I became a super fan who now is just the heavens are raining content on me in all different forms, from streaming it to playing it to listening to it. And to me, that's just good. I'm not going to say, oh, this made this bad or this isn't good because now I can't do this. I don't look at it that way, but some super fans might. And your turn, Scott Wilson.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to say that, like I'm really curious to see how this Mario movie is going to do. I'm very curious because I've always felt on some level that character, he could be a watershed moment in and of himself if a movie works. I think they made a good decision by going with 3D animation as opposed to live action.
Or a hybrid like they did with Sonic. I thought the hybrid live action CG with Sonic suited that well. I don't know that it would suit Mario well.
Yeah, but I'm kind of really interested to see how far this can go. Because, like, again, I think that this could be a big bang moment for these things. I mean, it's just very hard to tell. I mean, like, in some of these properties, like, how would you make a Call of Duty game? I don't know that there's any
because it's like Saving Private Ryan or something else at that point.
My thing, watch Saving Private. Watch Saving Private Ryan rather than watch that.
Right.
But it's also in terms of adapting something that's basically first-person perspective, because that becomes a whole other thing into itself. They made a Doom movie.
They made a Doom movie that had a brief scene that went full first-person. Matter of fact, there's like an action hero movie that's on Netflix where the whole thing is shot in a first-person point of view. So it's a live-action video game presentation. But I forgot what they called it. Some weird name for it.
I mean, again, it's just like, something like that, something like Call of Duty. There really is no story there. The story is meant to facilitate the gameplay.
Right.
So there really isn't. There's a bare bones of a story that you've seen in a million.
Right. So then you can watch something like SEAL Team on there's live streaming of SEAL Team, and there used to be a show called The Unit, and there's been a lot of basically guerrilla warfare type live action TV shows that you can watch that would, kind of give you that fix.
And I think that's also a problem that some of these properties, like say Castlevania or
Hardcore Henry, Louis Reyes says,
like
that live action one. Thank you, Louis.
Some of these older side-scrolling action games, I think that's a problem some of those might run into if they ever try to adapt any of that stuff, because the story really it's just there to facilitate the gameplay. It's not
right.
Really,
well, Netflix does have an anime live action of Castlevania, and I watched part of season 1. I thought it was intriguing, but it's been so long I forgot it. Yeah.
So it's again, I think some of the more modern games that are much more story driven would probably make for a better fit. But we'll see. I mean,
So Uncharted, which you and I saw together when we first kind of started hanging out, was a great live action starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. That that is now PlayStation Studios. So Sony, who makes the PlayStation video game console, they're now having their own studio where they're making movies based on their video game properties. So Sony PlayStation Studios gave us Uncharted, and Uncharted was a great game. And again, this is art imitating art, but Uncharted, the video game, was totally inspired by Indiana Jones. The whole, tomb raiding, adventuring, archaeological type stuff. And so that's a modern video game based on Indiana Jones. And so now the movie based on the video game based on Indiana Jones has all these kind of Easter eggs and love letters to all the different Indiana Jones movies. And it was great fan service. But at the end of the day, it was a good movie. And again, I never played the game because I don't have a PlayStation, but I just enjoyed the movie because it was entertaining. It was well performed. It was well produced. It was like a grandma's cookie. It was made with love, so it was delicious. And so as Rowdy's saying, they're both from Naughty Dog Studios, Uncharted and The Last of Us. And again, as I was saying, The Last of Us was so good. The fact I never knew the game existed or never played the game didn't take away from my enjoyment. So that's live action done well. That's a property done well. And so that's kind of the question here. Can these things be the next big boom where they're going to make the money that the Marvel stuff made? Can the video games do it, or can the movies based on video games do it? I don't know that there's a clear answer, but it's a great topic to chew on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be getting our answers sooner rather than later, as Hollywood, has a voracious appetite for these things. They're always looking for something that they can exploit, or really not something, but a certain group of viewers that they can exploit and expand on and make bigger, and or take something that a certain group of people like and then expand on the audience for that, and make it bigger, and then once that thing is sucked dry, they move on. Sort of like the aliens in Independence Day. It's just they move on from one planet to another, sucking up resources. So what's going to be the next thing that they latch onto? Because like I said, this superhero thing has arguably been ruling the roost for about 20 years or so right now, and definitely for the last decade and change.
There's going to come a reckoning.
Yeah,
a reckoning is coming. But I don't think the big blockbuster spectacle is ever going to go away. It won't go away, but it might not just be Marvel and DC that are dominating the box office charts, but there will still be big movies like your Top Guns, your Avatars, your Jurassic Worlds. Big spectacle, visual effects, special effects heavy movies are always going to be the thing that most people are going to want to see. There's other people who like art films and like dramas and like comedies and like the romantic comedies or the love stories. There's markets for all those movies. For me, just being the nerd that I am, I'm only going to pony up $15 to see a movie if it's a spectacle. It's got to be a larger than life story. That's what I want to get in a seat to watch. There were times when I would go to the movie theater and watch something like the Pet Detective and Jim Carrey movies and Dumb and Dumbers and Step Brothers and things like that where there's something about Mary. So there was a time when I didn't mind seeing a comedy, but I've been so spoiled by these larger than life movies over the past 20 years that I'm not going to spend money to see those movies. I'll wait for them to come on streaming, but I will spend money to see a top tier action movie a spectacle, superhero movie or something like that, a Star Wars, Jurassic Park, a superhero, whatever it is. I will see those in the theater because that's my jam now and at this stage in life.
Right. Well, at this point, I could say more, but to use that word again, redundant, I think I would kind of be going in circles at this point because now it's just a wait and see sort of thing. Let's see how the next year plays out or the next couple of years, and we'll see how the superhero thing plays out, and we'll see how Mario does. And because I'm sure if the Mario movie does big enough business, and something tells me that this has a chance to really be a breakout hit in a way that people might not be expecting.
Right, and this is now Nintendo being like DC to Marvel, where Sonic the Hedgehog, which is Sony, and I assume it's Sega. So Sega Studios now, which has got now 2 Sonic the Hedgehog movies under their belt, they hit the market first, and they've enjoyed some financial and critical success. And so they're kind of like the Marvel of superhero movies. So now Nintendo's coming in as kind of the DC. They have something to prove. And I'm sure they will because Nintendo globally is probably more recognized and more beloved than Sega properties are. I think Sega was always more of a older crowd that it appealed to, whereas Nintendo and Mario's been an all ages thing forever. But yeah, I think that movie is destined to do well just because there's 30 years and 3 generations of people who grew up on different versions of Mario video games on different devices and platforms. And there's a huge built-in audience. So all they have to do is make a movie that doesn't suck and it will sell well. How well the story and the performances are will dictate how many sequels will ever come from that. Time will tell. But it's going to be a success no matter what, just because of the property that it's dealing with.
Right. So, yeah, I think I'm kind of where I need to be in terms of this discussion until we see some further developments. So, I don't know if you have anything else.
No, again, we can talk in circles and we can meander and filibuster forever. But I think it's a great question. I don't know if the question has an answer, but it's thought provoking. It's something to chew on, and it's something that I will be watching because I'm as much of a fan of video games as I am of movies and TV shows. I would like to talk about one more thing now that is not this topic, but another topic, which is now legacy sequel series on TV, because I'm watching a few of them. And again, you can be a fan of something, and when a new version of that comes out, you can not like it for a variety of reasons. But I'm going to give 2 examples of things that I do like. One of them is really cheesy, and I'm ashamed to admit this, but there's a brand new Night Court that's on Peacock streaming service. And I was a huge fan of Night Court back in the day with, who was it? Harry Dean Anderson, who played the judge. And I used to see him on like HBO and Showtime comedy specials. He was like a magician and he did all kinds of stuff like that. But he played a judge, and it was a great sitcom that took place at a Night Court. It had John Larroquette, had the tall bald guy called Bull, who was kind of like the bailiff, and later on Marsha Warfield came in, who was kind of the sassy chick. So it was just a cool show that had a really great run. There's a brand new version of Night Court now, and it's not a reboot. I think I'm not a fan of reboots ever, and I've never seen one that's done well, although I think Magnum P.I. is doing okay because my wife watches it. But this is a legacy sequel where she is the daughter of, the daughter of Harry, the judge. Right. And they brought John Larroquette back, but it's an all-new cast. But it is a cheesy 80s sitcom done in a cheesy 80s sitcom style with the laugh track and everything, but just for a modern audience. And it's cute and it's funny, and they're 22 minutes, and I love them. So that is a great example of one done right. Another one that I'm watching that I think is on Peacock too, but I have too many streaming services to remember, is the new Quantum Leap. And here's Rowdy's jumping into on that Quantum Leap. So this Quantum Leap, it's not a reboot. It's a kind of a legacy sequel where they are picking up where the original show left off. And so it's still the same kind of organization, and this technology is just moving forward, but it's not a reboot. It's a continuation. And it's done very well. And it's a fast food meal. There's not a lot. And you get it done, and you're reasonably satisfied by the end of it. It's good acting. There's always a morality monologue in there that's very thought provoking, and they're touching on a lot of different things. But there's an interesting story, and how it's working now is uniquely different the sci-fi part is more different. So in the original Quantum Leap, the way Sam always explained it was his timeline is a rubber band. And so you can never go more into the future than where you've lived, and you can only go back in time as far as you've lived in this rubber band, kind of this circle. But then what if we take this rubber band and we just roll it all up? And now I can jump to any point in my life, right? So that is how they explained how he could do this quantum leaping in that show. In this new version now, he is jumping to times that are either before his lifetime and stuff too. So how he's jumping and leaping now is different than how they explained it in the first run. And so it's interesting. And why he leaped, they still don't know. He had amnesia. There's a few things like that. So they're stringing you along in a good way. So I feel like that. And as Luis Reyes is asking too, Picard. I'm loving Picard season 3, and this is going to be the final season. But again, kind of a legacy sequel that I'm watching, and that is on Paramount Plus. Great one too. So yeah, I think legacy sequels can be done well. If, again, just like a video game thing, if you treat it with respect and you do it with love and you just try to make a quality whatever you're making and make the best thing you can make. And I think if you do it well, I believe it will resonate and people will like it. And so I would definitely say that these are some examples of stuff I'm seeing that I like. And if you haven't seen them, I would say check them out.
Okay, I'll definitely try to check out at least one of them.
Now, did you have something you wanted to show off, Scott Wilson?
Well,
or is there anything else you want to talk about before that?
No, nothing really substantial. I'll just save anything substantial for another show.
Let me know when you're getting it ready, and I will switch to our infographic as you're pulling that out of its Amazon Prime bubble wrap here. Dun, da, da, da. Drum roll, please. So here's a little segment that we call How Did You Geek This Week? And here's our no expense spared infographic.
How did you geek this week?
All right, we spared all expense on that. So, Scott T. Wilson, what did you do this week in your geek hobby?
One of the things is a graphic novel that I had the chance to thumb through and read at work today during a break, and that is a graphic novel based on the classic blaxploitation movie Blackula. And this is sort of a continuation, or I'm trying to think of what the right word is, sort of a sequel to a legacy sequel to Blackula. It's called Blackula Return of the King, and it is written by Rodney Barnes, and it features art by Jason Sean Alexander, and both of these are people of note. And I was, in reading through it, this is actually a pretty good story. It's a pretty good idea for a legacy sequel. Especially done in like a graphic novel format. I mean, anybody who hasn't seen Blackula, I would recommend you watch it, because it may sound ridiculous and exploitive and silly, but it's actually not a bad.
Was it as good as Harlem Nights?
Totally different. Totally different vein. Totally different vein.
Go ahead. I'll let you finish. And one more thing just popped into my head.
But it's definitely worth the read, and I would encourage anybody, if you haven't seen Blackula and this sounds interesting to you, check out Blackula. You can even check out its sequel, which I can't remember the name of at the moment, but it does have a sequel.
Blackula 2, Black Harder.
It's killing me that I can't remember the sequel. It's killing me that I can't remember the name of it, but Pam Grier is in that sequel.
The lovely and talented and sumptuous Pam Grier. She is 100% woman. But
it'll definitely provide some necessary background. If you plan on reading this novel, again, it's called Blackula: Return of the King.
Return of the King.
Just to give people a good view of it here.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good read. It's substantial. It comes in, like, I think 5 chapters, so to speak. The art is like really amazing. There's a lot of painting in it. It's painted art. It looks like. A lot of this looks even photorealistic.
Yeah, no, that's good. That is good.
But and it's the plot. Not to give too much away, the plot is because in the original Blackula, spoiler alert, for a movie that came out in the early to mid 70s, Blackula was turned into a vampire initially by Vlad the Impaler, by
By
Count
the original,
Dracula.
by the source. So he's like a second generation
Yeah, so this
vampire.
So
He's
this,
not like a
this-
lesser vampire.
This story has him returning to seek revenge on Dracula for what he does, and Dracula's kind of the big bad of the story, and Blackula himself has become an urban legend in Los Angeles, which is where the original film took place. And again, it's surprisingly good. It's a surprisingly fun read. So check that out. If your local comic shop doesn't have it, they had it available on Amazon. That's where I got it from.
One more legacy sequel that I've seen 1 or 2 episodes of that I'm actually really impressed of, but now on Hulu, there is History of the World Part 2. This is a Mel Brooks joint, right?
Oh, yeah, I
And
remember that.
so, and the irony of History of the World Part 1, part of the appeal and the humor of that was it was only one movie, and it was never intended to be another movie, but they called it History of the World Part
Part
1.
one.
And then they had kind of like closing credits, like teasing what Part 2 would include. I remember one of them was Jews in Space, where they had the big spaceships that looked like the Star of David flying around, and they're wearing the little yarmulkes and their little curly hairs and stuff, because Mel Brooks, being Jewish, loves to bring a lot of Jewish humor to his stuff. But yeah, History of the World Part 1 was basically a bunch of sketch comedy things that were kind of strung together, and there ended up being kind of a through line between these different segments. History of the World Part 2, my first question was, okay, is Mel Brooks involved in this at all? And he absolutely is. So when you watch episode 1, he introduces it all and everything. And so they're episodic, they're 20 to 30 minutes, and there's like little 5-minute snippets and sketches. And again, it's got the same heart and soul of the original one. Modern actors you're more familiar with now, very raunchy, good humor, a little bit more topical now. It's kind of keying into things that are more social media centric and Instagram centric and things like that. So they're bringing in modern humor to even like medieval scenes, but it's done well. So another great new legacy sequel I've seen a few of that I would say go out and see.
Okay, so yeah, I can't, and anything else that I would want to talk about, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head at the moment. I mean, next week I'm hoping if you get a chance, or maybe we can see it together. I don't know.
Have you seen the new Shazam?
No, I have not. Did not
Okay.
get a chance to see it this weekend, but I'm definitely trying to see John Wick 4.
Oh yeah, I've heard good things about that. That it's actually surpassed all 3, which is hard to do.
Right, so I'm definitely gonna.
So let me ask you this: what we're talking about today, something that stands on its own. Is John Wick that? Is John Wick something that's standing on its own? Even though this whole revenge genre is not new, the fact that this has become a sensation and a franchise, has it? Would it be watershed, to use your term?
Well, I think it. I don't know if I could really. I don't know if I would call it watershed. I mean, I think it definitely reminded us of what an underappreciated talent Keanu Reeves is as an action star. I think it kind of revived a type of action film that Hong Kong popularized. John Woo was known for. It's called Heroic Bloodshed. And it also has some anime, definitely a lot of Asian pop culture influences on John Wick. I would say the first movie stands out as one of the more notable and influential action films of the last decade. I would definitely say that.
Fair and accurate.
I kind of don't like to put sequels in that same place because, I mean, I like the John Wick sequels. I didn't like either of them quite as much as I enjoyed the first movie when I first saw it. This third one, I have heard great things about it. It's 3 hours.
It's the fourth one.
The fourth one,
Yeah,
it's
3 hours. Yeah.
So
that will be interesting to see. Yeah, that would be something where that's something I'd want to see in a theater. That's the blockbuster. That's the spectacle.
So watershed. I'm not sure. I'd have to really think about that. Like I said, of the last 10 years, yeah, it's definitely one of the more notable ones. But watershed, I would have to think about that one. I mean, I'm pretty sure for people of a certain age, it probably is who weren't around to see Chow Yun-Fat in like Hard Boiled or The Killer, or things of that nature, or who weren't old enough to really be familiar with Cowboy Bebop, like when it was just an anime.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I'm hoping to talk about that next week. That's
Right.
what I'm looking forward to talking about next week.
All right. Well, we'll put a fork in this episode. This was a good topic. So, yeah, we've definitely strayed away for a few weeks, but not just reviewing the latest episode on streaming or a recent movie, which is good. It's good to talk about other things and bring some variety into this. So thank you once again. And we're meeting in a different location, and that's kind of the nice thing. I've got a portable studio, so I can pick this thing up anywhere and record or stream without anywhere we go. So I'm actually using a friend of mine's business here just because I knew my house was going to be too noisy tonight. An interesting thing too is we're sitting on two of the same chairs now, and you can kind of see our height difference here. If somebody's listening later, they won't see that. But you see how grown Scott Wilson is. A grown ass man. How tall are you, Scott?
6'5".
6'5". He looks like he's like 7'4". But tall as one, he's a tall son gun, right? So I'm like 5'11", 6 foot on a good day, and he just towers above me. So yeah, these chairs aren't too bad, right? These high top chairs. Because we usually have to roll a couple of office chairs into my office at my house, and everything's squeaking, and my butt's hurting by sitting on these chairs. So we're sitting in some comfortable high top chairs. We're kind of sitting on a little bar countertop thing here. It works. Maybe we'll do this some more. Let's see how the audio comes out. I know there's probably a lot of room noise, and I hear a motorcycle or a vehicle go by every now and then. But what are you going to do? Another great episode. Thank you all for watching. So Luis Reyes, thank you for being there in the live chat. Rowdy, thank you for being there. Mark Zatorsky, thanks for being there. And anybody who listens to this later on, we'd really love to hear some feedback from people who are watching or listening to the show, just so we can know what people think. Constructive criticism, feedback, suggestions, comments, etc. So send us an email to show@culturegoespop.com or go to our website, culturegoespop.com, for links to all the places you can listen to the audio podcast replays or video replays, all that good stuff. Love to hear from the people who are watching or listening to us, just to get your nod of approval or disapproval for that matter, but just a little bit of feedback on the show. Anything you want to say before we press the button here, Scott Wilson?
Just thank you to everybody in the chat for taking the time out to, watch the show, listen to the show, and discuss it with us. Thank you for anybody who's listening, because, I realize that's a choice, not an obligation. Your time, you choose to give us your time, and I appreciate that. We both appreciate that.
And we are coming up on April 1st is going to be our anniversary. Because April 1st was our first episode. So we're a week or two away from our anniversary. Should we celebrate? What should we do to celebrate our first anniversary of doing a show together, Scott?
I have no idea. I'd have to think about that one.
Okay, well, and again, there's a great opportunity for suggestions. Send us a comment on Facebook or throw us an email. Give us just a suggestion on how we should celebrate. Would it be too cheesy and corny to do a montage and review clips from all our episodes? Is that too self-indulgent? Or
that's something that would take a lot of time. The amount of editing that would take is
maybe we at least go through the episode list and just maybe reminisce on some of the episodes we did. But it's it's an anniversary. We should do something. And by the way, too, we do have a theme song which is recorded and produced, and there's even a music video to go for it. So my good friend, the Gimp from Hollow Ground Records, the Gimp and Stagger. So I'm trying to get them on so we can debut our new theme song. And it's a jam. I'm just going to say that. It is a jam, and I want you to hear it. I want you to get your genuine reaction of this. But once we debut that and we do the interview with the creators of it, that will be our new theme song from moving forward. Ask each other the same questions and see how they answer now. Do rock, paper, scissors round and to see who has won the most in a year. Okay. Ask yourself the same questions that we asked ourselves earlier on and see if our answers have changed. Yeah, there's a couple ideas there. Thanks, Luis Reyes. All right, we're going to press the button. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for supporting us and listening and watching to us.
Goodbye, everybody.